Hi everyone, this is Abhiram and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is about how to execute the financial month-end or the year-end closing activities using the SAP's Financial Closing Cockpit. So before we start the video, do not forget to subscribe to my channel and keep updated about my latest videos. So what is Financial Closing Cockpit? Financial Closing Cockpit is a centralized tool by SAP which helps us to execute and monitor different period end closing activities from a single place. We can configure the various activities that are part of the financial closing. We can configure the various dependencies between these. We can configure various rules and we can configure various notes, and it helps us to closely observe and monitor the different activities that are part of the closing. So let's go ahead into the system and see where and how we can configure this. So we are using the SAP 1909 system, and under the cross application components, we can find SAP S4HANA Financial Closing Cockpit. So we have 4 different transactions for financial closing. As we can see, we are having for customization, we are having for execution, and we are having for preparation. So as the name says, the customizing transaction is to configure various settings for the financial closing, and once it is done, we need to prepare different types of rules, and after that we will go to the execution transaction code where we can execute these financial closing activities as defined in the closing cockpit. So to understand more, let us go into the financial closing cockpit customization transaction. So here you can see this is the transaction where you can create and configure various activities for the financial closing. So here we are having the first activity of creating a template, and then we are having create task group. So what is a template and what is a task group? A template is a set of activities that are part of the financial closing. Within the template, you can create multiple task groups where you can group different tasks. Tasks here are nothing but the transactions or the programs or the various activities that are part of the closing. So you can select various activities, you can group them together in a task group, and under a single template, you can create multiple task groups. So once you create this template with the different activities, then you will create a task list, which is nothing but it is a copy of the template, which you will use for execution of the financial closing. So what is the difference between a template and a task list? So you create a template, and from a template you can create multiple task lists. That means from one template that you are creating, you can use this for multiple closing activities multiple times. So you can create n number of task lists from a single template, and any changes made to a task list does not impact any other task list or even the template. Similarly, if you are making any changes to the template after the creation of a task list, these new changes to the template also do not affect this task list. So let us understand more by creating a template. So either you can create a template or you can already use the standard SAP provided templates for financial closing. So let us go ahead and let us see what are the standard ones that are provided by SAP. So SAP had provided us a month-end financial closing template. It has provided us a year-end closing financial template. So let me go into the month-end closing now. So here you can see this particular template is created at both a controlling area level and a company code level. That means activities related to the controlling area as well as the company code are part of this particular template. So you can see there are various different task groups. These folders are called as task groups, and under this template of the 1FC month, we are having different task groups, one for the preparatory closing activities and one for the closing tasks that needs to be executed at the period end, and other one are the post closing activities or the subsequent closing tasks. So here you can see these are the various activities. So you can start using the predefined templates. You can make a copy of this template and make changes to this particular template as per your requirement. So let us do one thing. For the sake of simplicity, I am going to delete few activities which I believe are not part of my period end closing. So let me delete these both. So in order to make any changes to an existing SAP provided templates, the first thing is we need to make a copy of this one. If you try to edit this template, then the system gives you a message to make a copy of this template. So let's click yes. Now we have created a new template by copying the standard one, and here we will try to delete these selected entries. Okay. And let us delete from here. Similarly, I am also deleting the subsequent closing tasks. So now we are having only the main closing activities, and here also let us try to remove all the other module related closing activities and let us put only the financial accounting. So let me delete it. Delete. So now we are having only the financial closing activities. So under this task group, if you see, there are various tasks that have been assigned. So tasks, as we have discussed, are nothing but various programs or the transaction codes that are to be executed as a part of the financial closing. So if you see the properties of this one, so you can see this is the description, and this is a program, this is a period open program. So using this program, you are trying to open a new period or close an existing period. So there are various properties of a task. Under this closing cockpit, the main advantage is that not only you can define various activities that are part of the closing, but you can also define what is the dependency of each of these activities, whether these activities, which of these activities are part or of a critical path, and who is the person responsible for executing these tasks during the period and closing activities. So here you can give the user ID who is part of this one, and you can also give some authorization group if you want to restrict access only to few particular users, and here you are defining what is the task about. So a task can be a program, a transaction code, or a batch job, or a flow definition, or even a simple normal note. A note says what are the steps that needs to be performed, or any other note that the user needs to be informed during the activity. So here this is taken as a program, and this is the program name that is being used. So here you are having various options like what are the planned offset days and what is the planned duration. Planned offset days are nothing but this is the time at which this particular activity is to be executed. For example, consider that we are taking the template of a month end closing activity. So if it is a month end closing activity, suppose in your company the closing activities are performed 1 day before the or 2 days before the last day of the month. For example, if this is a month of February and 28 is the last date, 27th or 26th might be the date on which your company might be performing the closing activities. So you can define that when this particular task is supposed to be executed for that particular month. So if you define it as an offset value here, plus or minus values, then this particular task can be executed only if that particular time is achieved. So planned offset days, if I define it as -2. So let us go to the properties again. So if you see now, the planned offset days is now changed to -2. So what is -2? -2 means this is to be executed 2 days before the last day of the month. And where are we mentioning that this is -2 from the last day? That we will mention it in the task list which we are going to create from the template. So for now we are going to define in the template that in every task list that is being created from this template, this particular program of opening the posting periods is to be executed 2 days before the last day of the month or 2 days before the key date of that particular task list. Key date can be a last day of the month or last working day of the month depending upon the requirement. So this -2 or even if it is a +2, then it can be this is calculated by taking the key date as the base, and key date we will define it while we are creating the task list. And we can also define what is the planned duration of this one, so that once the activity has been executed, we can compare it with the actual duration with the planned duration, and we can try to achieve or understand what is the reason that has caused the variance. So here we are going to mention whether it is a critical path or not. So what is a critical path? If we mention this activity as a critical path, that means this activity or the duration of this activity impacts the execution of every other activity in the entire task group. So that means if this activity is not executed, then no other activity can be executed, or probably if this activity has failed, then other activities cannot be executed. So that means this activity is critical for the entire execution of financial closing. So this is a part of the critical path. If you scroll down, we are having other options like month-end closing, used in year-end closing, used in quarter, special closing, or any other user-defined usage. So what do you mean by this? We have created this template for a month-end closing, but here we are having options to see use in month-end or quarter or year-end, because as we said, we are just creating a template, and from a single template we can create multiple task lists. So this task list can be used for a month-end closing or an year-end closing or a quarter-end closing or a special closing or any other type of closing that you can define on your own. So whatever tasks you are defining in this template can be used in multiple types of closing. For that reason, here we are going to mention whether this particular task is a part of a month-end closing or an year-end closing or not. So depending upon what you have selected here, this task will be picked up by the system if it is applicable for that particular closing. For example, if you are performing a closing activity or if you are executing the task list for this template on the end of February, which is a month-end closing, then the system will take only those tasks which are marked as use in month-end closing. If I remove this use in month-end closing, then this task is not executed or is not picked up by the system if you are doing a month-end closing. Similarly, if you do not select the year-end closing, this activity is picked up only as a month-end closing but not an year-end closing. So save it. So similarly, here if you see, this is the task. If you see the button or the image next to this description, you can see this is an executable task. This is just a note. So if you can also define your own tasks, you can just right click on the folder or the task group under which you want to create it, and you can create a task. And here you can define the description, the user responsible, and what is the type of the program that or transaction or type of any other task that you want to define here. So if I double click on this one, I can see the various activities in this window. So from here we can see what are the different tasks, who is the person responsible for this one, what is the planned duration for this one, and we can also see whether it is a part of a critical path or not. And we can also define whether this particular task is having any dependency or not. So that we can define it from this screen. So before that, let us save this template which we have created. So I will give this as test1, or I will add it to my company code and responsible user. And here you can maintain the various values like the factory calendar, which will help you to define whether the execution date, if it is dependent on the holidays. And you can enter the time zone in which this needs to be executed and the master language as English. Okay, no worries. So now let us try to add a dependency for this first task, open new posting period. So we want to add a dependency that before you can open a new posting period, you want to lock the posting period for the customer accounts. So I will double click on this one. So let us go to the dependencies, and here select the task which you want to add as a dependency. In our case it is this one, and if you right click on this one, you can have this option called insert dependencies. So under the dependencies, you can add it whether as a predecessor, which means that this task needs to be executed before the previous task, or if you add it as a successor, which means this new task should be executed after the completion of the other task. So in our case, let us take this as a successor for the other activity. So I will click on successor. Okay, it says successor period lock for the customer accounts has been created. So we have selected two different tasks here. So it is saying that we cannot create a dependency with the task itself, that means for this activity, but for the other activity it has successfully created as a successor. So if you see here, the same is reflected here. For this particular activity number 66, the task 68 is a successor. And you can also see that for 66, 68 is a successor, and for 68, 66 is a predecessor. So the person who is responsible for executing the financial closing activities should ensure that he is trying to execute the programs in this order in which the dependencies are maintained. If the user tries to execute the task number 68 without executing the task number 66, then the system throws an error message. So this is how under a single template you can create various task groups, and under various task groups you can add various tasks, and tasks can be a program or a transaction code or a note or a batch job, and you can create various dependencies between these tasks. Now let us save this one. And as I said, you cannot start executing the period end activities just by creating a template. From this template, we need to create a task list, and this task list is the one that is used to execute the activities. And you can create multiple task lists from a single template. So the usage of this one is, you will create a single template for all activities like period end activities of month end, year end, quarter end, or any other custom closing activities that you want to perform. And from this single template, while creating the tasks, you will define what is this task needs to be executed for, whether it needs to be executed for a month end only, or month end and year end, or year end only, etc. And depending upon this definition of the task, once you create a task list, you can create multiple task lists, like one for month end closing, one for each month, and one for a year, one for a quarter. So depending upon the definition of the task, that task will be called whenever that particular task list is executed. So let us go back and let us try to create a task list. So for creating a task list, we will go to the financial closing cockpit preparation transaction and open our template here. So our template is AVIN1. So this template has been called. So you can see these are the various activities that we have defined in our template. And from this template, we are creating a periodic task list. So what is the key date? So here is where you are going to define that what is this task list being used for. So whether it is being used for a month end closing, or if it is a month end, for which month, and what is the key date on which this task list is supposed to be executed. So let us assume that this is for 28/02/2021. So this is a month end closing. I will change it to February month end closing. And here we are going to define what is the type of closing. So here we are saying it is a month end closing. So depending upon what you have selected in the closing type, the task list will execute only those tasks which are matching with this closing type. And what is the posting period? So 02 is the posting period which you are trying to execute, and 2021 is the year. So here you are having the status as active, complete, pause, or released. So before we change this status to released, we will try to make some changes in this task list and try to see whether it is reflected in the template or not. And always the task list needs to be under the status released in order to be executed. So click OK. So if you see, we have created a new task list AVIN1, and this task list is to be executed on 28th of February 2021. If you remember, for this particular activity, we have defined what is the planned start date. We have defined it as -2 from the key date. So our key date, what we have given in this task list, is 28th of Feb. So -2, which is 26th, is automatically picked up by the system as a planned start. So we have also defined a duration of 30 minutes. So it is showing what is the planned start date and planned end date for this activity. So like this, you can create the planned start dates based on the key date of the task list. Now let us try to make some change. For example, this clearing run, I am going to delete it from this task list. So let me go to the edit mode. Yes. So this clearing run, I am going to delete it here. Yes. So now I am trying to save this one, and now let us go back to our template and let us see if this clearing task is still present or not. If you see here, the clearing run is still present in the template even though we have deleted it from the task list. So as I said, once you create a task list from a template, whatever changes you are making to this template is specific only to that particular template. If you are creating 10 task lists from that particular template, if you are making changes to one task list, then it is not going to impact any other task list or even the template itself from which you have created that task list. Now let me try to delete this activity from the template. So edit it and let us delete this task. Yes, and save it. Now let us open the template which we have, the task list which we have created from this template, and let us see whether it is impacted or not. So this GL goods activity is still present here. The GRAR clearing activity is still present in the task list even though we have deleted it from the template. So this is how the template and the task list are independent of each other. They are not interdependent once you create a task list. So you should be cautious while you are making any changes to the task list that it does not impact any other task list. So if you are changing or if you are removing an activity from your February month end closing, it is still executed for the other months if you have created that task list from the same template. So now let us go to this properties and let us try to activate this one. So here you cannot see this button to execute because this particular task list is not activated. So let us go to more. Under edit, let us go to the basic data. So in this basic data, you can change the status of this task list to released. Now save it. Save it. Yes. Now you can see you are having this option to execute these tasks online. You can select, you can execute this foreground or you can execute this in the background. Now let us go to this task, this transaction which is used for executing the task list. So let us open our task list. So you can see this task list only if it is activated. Unless until the status is released or activated, you cannot see this particular task list in the execution transaction. So I am having these individual activities. So let me select this one and let us execute this task. It will take us to this program which is used. You can do whatever activity that you are supposed to do here, and once you are done, just come out of this transaction and you can change the status of this to completed or failed, whatever, depending upon the result that you have obtained from this transaction. So unless until you manually update this transaction status, it remains in this status of unknown. So you need to go here, change the status, and whatever is the obtained output, you can update it based on this one. So you can enter this reason, executed successfully. So now the status of this first job has been changed to successful. So similarly, you are going to execute each and every activity that you are supposed to execute. You are going to maintain different observations here, and this will help us to ensure that no single activity is missed as a part of the financial closing, and each activity is executed in the proper order in which it needs to be executed, and not only the person who is executing, but also the remaining people who are responsible for monitoring or executing this one financial closing activities can understand the dependencies and keep monitoring closely on this execution. So this is how the financial closing cockpit is created, how the task lists are created, and how it is executed. The most important question related to the financial closing cockpit that is asked often in the certification exams is, what is the hierarchy or what are the different activities or the sequence of activities that you perform as a part of your financial closing cockpit. So the first activity is creation of a template, and the second activity is creation of a task group, and after that, once you created a template with the different task groups, you will assign tasks, and after the assignment of tasks, once you save this template, you will create a task list from this template, and after the creation of a task list, you are going to activate or release it, and then you are going to execute this particular task list. So this is about SAP S4HANA closing cockpit. I hope you like this video. Please do subscribe to keep encouraging me to post more videos. See you in the next one. Thank you.